All right, I think we are going live. Okay, I think we're live. All right. Hey, everyone. Happy Sunday. Welcome to the session. Thank you once again for joining me and us in this session. We're honored to be here with you once again in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And we look forward to sharing time with you in our shared sacred space today. So happy to be here. So what I want to do today in our time together in sacred space is to, we'll set sacred space. And I think we'll follow the same sort of schedule we've been doing in the past couple months at this point, I think, where we'll talk about an overall topic. And the topic today will be the secret key of healing, or the deepest key of healing. And we'll do that again through telling a folk tale, this time from the Russian tradition that Gowrie has selected, which I'm actually pretty excited about. And then we'll do a little exercise at the end of that, and then we'll close sacred space. Okay. So to set sacred space today, I'll go ahead and set the goal first, which is to say that this is, we intend to create a space here together now, which is devoid of fear, threat, and control, in order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, however we choose to define that. It could be intuition, it could be sort of higher divine sort of presence or deity sort of guiding us. But in order to get this signal, we would like to place ourselves in a safe sanctuary space where we can all relax and surrender with no danger or threat, so that we can partake of the emotional nourishment and spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. And in opening sacred space today, I will propose, as I do every week, that we all follow the 4 principles of Presidian sacred space. The first is confidentiality, standard Vegas rules. What happens in sacred space stays in sacred space. Now, because we're online and the session is open to the public, and the video is recorded and the replay is available publicly as well, the way we do anonymization here is through, the way we do confidentiality here is through anonymization. So if you would like to be anonymous while participating in the session, you don't have to be anonymous. You don't have to participate in the session. But if you would like to be anonymous and participate, the way you would do that is to go into the crowdcast stream of the session. And then after you register and enter, you go to the edit profile function, you change your username to Mickey Mouse or Harry Potter or whatever you'd like to have that name be, and then come back in and then chat and ask questions from there. The second principle is that we ask for an environment where there is no threat, no controlling, no intervention, no fixing, no tough love. Right? In other words, regardless of the intention, we do not seek to control or fix or intervene to help each other for their own good. There's nothing wrong with that, but because that is of the provenance of control, it is of the realm of the profane. And we're here in sacred space because, not because the profane is bad, but because we want to be in sacred space so that we can do the things and have the experiences and partake of the nourishment that, just from the physics of the thing, you can only do in sacred space. So here we are holding space for each other to be afraid, to be anxious, to be however we are, right? To be relieved that we're anxious, to feel guilty that we're anxious, or to just be happy if we find ourselves being happy and relaxed, and guilty about being happy, or okay with being happy. However we are, we simply hold space for each other and for ourselves. To continue to be however we happen to find ourselves in the shared sacred space. And that alone will give a form of nourishment. The third principle is no commerce. Nothing may be sold or recommended or even suggested, even if it's a free sort of resource. I can't sell you anything. Gary can't sell you anything. We are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. We are here for what you are, not for what you do or provide. And the last principle of proceeding sacred space is that there is also no expectation of participation. There's no pressure to do anything. Again, the nourishment comes from the held space, and your presence and attention is what creates that held space. Again, it is from what you are, not from what you do or provide. You can, of course, practice sacred space on your own as an individual, but when a group of us come together in group sacred space, all of us doing that for ourselves and then for each other will tend to amplify that effect. And that's the kind of big stew pot or cauldron of nourishment that we create together. And then we all are able to feast on together. So this is what I propose. And if you are not okay with this, that's totally okay. There's no fear, threat, or control for you to come to sacred space or remain in sacred space. You can come and go as you please. But this is what we're about to do. So if you are, for any reason, not okay with that, that's totally okay. We want to give you a moment now to withdraw from the group. And we will still catch up with you later in profane space. We'll still hang out. No worries at all. So we'll give you all a moment to dial that in and make your selection. Okay. And so now for the rest of us, we will now move forward together into our shared sacred space. And as we come into sacred space together, I will remind us all of the 4 Presidian's principles of sacred space: confidentiality / anonymization, no fear, threat, or control, no tough love, no commerce, no recommendations, and 4th, no expectation of participation. All right, so welcome to sacred space at the end of a tumultuous and emotional week, at least in this country and for certain parts of the world. And I hope you all have survived the week well and are doing well. And that's about all the comments I will make on that. So this week, our topic is not insignificantly the secret key to healing. And in this session, the weekly call that Gary and I have, sort of brainstorming, where she selects and reads a fairy tale to me, and then I kind of read it and we brainstorm on how that might be the live sacred space session for the week. Our conversation led us on an exploration of how lifelong healing actually happens. And, the last month or so of sessions, we've been talking about the mechanics of healing, of the importance of embodiment, the importance of circumambulation, all these different factors, right? And this week we really hit on an archetype, which is the most powerful pattern and archetype at work in healing, at the deepest levels of healing in our lives. And it's a topic we've spoken about before, but this fairy tale, in my opinion, in our opinion, really zoomed in and sort of gave a much more detailed look at this archetype of the deepest mechanics of how healing actually works, how the caterpillar goes into the cocoon and how it actually comes out the other end. And this is a bit of a zoom into like what is actually happening in the cocoon, right? When we are undergoing that pressure and containment and undergoing that life transformation. And so I'll ask Gary to come up on screen now and join me here. And I think the folktale this time is from the Russian tradition. And I think what we'll do is we will ask Artie, as we have every week, to start the session, tell us the story, and then we'll kind of just let the golden thread take it from there. Hi, Gary. Hi. Good morning. Good evening.
Hi. Good evening. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Happy Sunday.
Yay.
So,
thank you for joining me again. Yeah. Take it away.
Russian folk. So, it's again, one of those bizarre kind of stories that don't seem to make any sense. So I love it so much more because of that. So I'll take you through the story, and then we kind of go back and forth on that.
Okay, great. Let me get off camera here.
So the folk tale is called Never Wash, right? And this is a story about a soldier who, you know, as these stories go, it's not it's timeless. So it goes once upon a time. There was a soldier who had served through 3 war campaigns, and then he was retired from the army. And by the time he retired, he'd never earned as much as an addled egg. So with absolutely nothing, he walks out, and he's walking on the road on and on until he finds a lake, and he sits down by the lake because he's tired and wants to catch some breath. And he thinks to himself, where shall I take myself now? What do I do? How shall I feed myself? And how the devil shall I enter into any service, you know, get any work? And as soon as he had said these words, a little devil rose up right in front of him and said, "Hey, soldier, what do you wish for? I heard you say that you wish to become one of our servants. So I'm here to hire you, and you'll be paid well." And the soldier asks, "Okay, what's the work?" And the devil says, "Oh, the work's easy enough. So for 15 years, you must not shave, you must not have your hair cut, and you must not blow your nose. You must not change your clothes, right? And if you do this for 15 years, then we will go to the king, you and I together. And the king has 3 daughters. You'll marry one of them, and the 2 others are mine. So that's the deal." And the soldier says, "All right, I think this is a good deal, but in return to agreeing to this deal, I need you to get me anything that my soul hankers after." And the devil says, "All right, done. So let's start this right away." And the soldier says, "Okay then, carry me at once to the capital and give me a pile of money." So you get me started that way. And you know how little any soldier, you know, gets in terms of money and all of this. So yeah, I need that to begin with, and then we'll see. So when the soldier said that, the devil went into the lake and then came out with a pile of gold. And he carried the soldier into the city at once. And the soldier thought to himself, you know, I've been such an idiot all my life. I haven't done any work. I haven't done any service right now. And I now have so much money. You know, so he thought about that, and he took a room for himself in the city. But true to his word, he never cut his hair, never shaved, never wiped his nose, never changed his clothes. And he lived like that all the time. And the surprising thing is that as he lived on, he grew more and more wealthy. And so wealthy that he didn't know what to do with the money that he had. And he thought to himself, what am I going to do with all this silver and gold? All right, you know, I think I know what to do. I'm going to help all the poor people. And, you know, it's just possible that they will pray for my soul. So that's the only thing I can think of. And thinking so, the soldier started to distribute alms to the needy and helping the poor, and helped pretty much everyone who needed help. And despite that, he still had money left over. And it didn't matter how much he gave away, he still had more and more money. And so, everyone started talking about this, and his fame spread everywhere. Everyone had heard of him. And this went on for 14 years. And the funny thing that happened is that after 14 years, on the 15th year, the Tsar, came into trouble. He had money troubles. He didn't have enough money to pay his soldiers. He'd been probably waging so many war campaigns that he'd run out of money. And of course, he'd heard about this soldier who helps everyone in need. So he summoned this soldier. And when he called him, the soldier came to the king's presence exactly the same way, unwashed, unshaved, the old clothes, uncombed, without wiping his nose, just exactly the way he'd promised the devil. And he greeted the king. And the king said, listen, I've heard all the stories and how you're good to everyone. I'm in trouble right now. I don't have enough money to pay my troops, my soldiers. So will you lend me some money? And if you do, I will promise you I will make you a general at once. And the soldier heard this and he said, no, Your Majesty, I don't want to be a general. But if you will do me a favor, I'd like to marry one of your daughters. And then, you will have as much money as you want. So now the king began to think. He was very fond of his daughters, and he wasn't sure that he would, any of his daughters would agree, and he wasn't sure about the soldier himself. But then he needed the money badly. So he said, okay, we'll do this. You have your portrait taken, and, I will show it to my daughters and ask which of them is willing to marry you. And so the soldier went back. He had his portrait painted. And the portrait was feature for feature exactly like him. And it was in the same condition that he was. Unwashed, unshaved, nose not wiped, and clothes not changed. Exactly the same thing. And he sent this portrait to the Tsar. And the Tsar, we know from the beginning of the story that the Tsar had 3 daughters. So he called all 3 of them and showed them the soldier's portrait. And he told the eldest daughter, I'm in trouble and this man can redeem me from my financial difficulties. So will you go and marry him? And the first princess looked at this monstrous creature that had been painted. And she looked at all the uncut nails and the unwiped nose. And she said, I would rather marry the devil than marry this guy. And instantly, from nowhere, the devil showed up, came from behind her, and with pen and paper, heard what she said, and said, okay, we're entering your soul on our register here. So the father then asked the next daughter, he said, will you go and marry this soldier? And this princess said, well, I would rather remain single. Tie me up to the devil, but I'm not going with this guy. And so, the devil showed up and inscribed her name on his register and said, okay, we have your soul as well. Now the father asked the youngest daughter, and this princess said, well, clearly this is probably what is destined for me. So I will go and marry him and see what will happen then. And the Tsar was quite relieved. So he went and told the soldier to, get ready for the betrothal. And he sent him all the cards that he needed for the money. And the soldier gave him 12 cards, right? And how he did this was that the soldier, when he realized he had to give the king the money, he made use of his devil. He called the devil and he said, well, there are these 12 cards and I need you to fill them all with gold. And the devil ran into the lake, as we've seen before, and set all the other devils to work. And slowly, some of them got back with 1 sack, some of them got back with 2 sacks. And they all soon filled up the carts and sent the carts to the king. And then the king, he saw this, and all his troubles, money troubles, had all cleared up. So he would summon the soldier every day. He would sit with him at the table. He would eat and drink with him. And finally, now the 15 years of the soldier's service was over, and he had to get ready for the marriage. So he called the devil and said, okay, I've served my part. My time's over. I want you to turn me into a youth. And now comes the interesting part. So the devil cuts him up into little bits and throws all of those bits into a cauldron and begins to brew him. And, then washes all the pieces, collects all his bones one by one. And then starts to reconnect. It rejoins every bone and every joint and every nerve with the corresponding nerve, joint, and bone. And then he sprinkles the water of life onto these pieces, now rejoined. And the soldier rises back, at this time as a fine young man, handsome to look at, and obviously all clean shaved and, bathed and with fresh clothes and everything. He's just fine looking young man. And then he marries the youngest princess. And then, as the story of the soldier ends here, so the little devil, he runs back into his lake, and his elder, takes him to task and says, you have to answer for what you've done with that soldier. And the little devil says, well, he served out his service quite faithfully, honorably. He never once shaved himself, never cut his hair, never wiped his nose, never changed his clothes. So I had to honor what I promised. And then the elder was really angry. He said, in 15 years, you're telling me that you couldn't corrupt the soldier? I mean, what was all that money for? You had so much money that you could use to do that. And what kind of a devil are you if you take 15 years and you still can't corrupt a person? And I'm going to throw you into the burning fire. Right? And the little devil tells him, please, grandfather, I know I've lost the soldier's soul, but I have gained 2 others. He says, what? And he says, look, the soldier was thinking of marrying the princess, and the 2 elder princesses declined, and they said, we would rather be with the devil than marry the soldier. So, there they are. We've got the 2 princesses. So then the grandfather devil said, okay, this sounds like a good idea. All right. You know your business very well. And, my bad. I kind of didn't think of this, but good on you. So that's how the story ends. So Artie, would you like to come back?
That's great. Let me turn my video back on.
All right, yeah.
Did you just say my bad?
I probably did think it was this bad.
Contemporary Russian fairy tale vernacular.
Yeah.
I love that story. Thank you for reading that. Thank you for selecting that story. So let me start with my usual question now. Where did you enter into that story? What hooked you about that story?
Well, the devil, definitely. The little devil. Because there was just, first of all, it's not the usual thing that we hear about the devil in common culture, right? I mean, that devil is supposed to be this evil, uncompromising, and then, it's just so much trouble. you certainly don't see the devil as someone who kind of offers solutions to your problems and helps you out when you're down on your luck. And all of these things that happen in the story, that's not the version of the devil we normally hear. So that was a complete surprise. Although we've come across this before, but it's still, every time I read this, that I'm like, where did we kind of have this version of the devil as against that version, which is the folk tales? I mean, there's somewhere there's a disconnect.
Something happened. Yeah,
something happened. And then the other thing is just how amazing the whole interaction with the devil is. They have this, the soldier asks for something, and then the devil says, oh, I can offer you this. And the soldier says, all right, then, if you want me to do this, let me ask you, this is what I need. So there is a very healthy interaction between, the soldier and the devil, which is what
bargaining and haggling. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I mean, when you presented this story, you had said that there would be a lot of elements that we're familiar with from our past work, right? And it was interesting because you're right. A lot of the same elements have come up of like doing a deal with the devil or this part of you. And the physics are all consistent with what we've talked about, when we teach like mythic healing and all these other things. But just the rearrangement of these elements kind of, to me, really taught me a lot more, revealed a lot more to me of the physics of these different elements. Right? I mean, I guess it's like different folk tales and fairy tales will talk about similar aspects of embodiment and grief and how the different parts of your own inner world interact with each other.
Yeah.
But I think one of the most powerful things here is that seeing different folk tales talk about the same physics, you kind of triangulate into like getting a clearer picture of what's going on. It's like when you do an imaging like MRI thing, it's like the imagers hit you from all these different angles, and then they're all combined into a single complete, more comprehensive image. So it was really exciting to really dive into the story. So thank you. Yeah. I guess the comments that I had, and I'll just dive in now, right? Is that in the duck liver story, the one from 2 or 3 weeks ago, like hang the moon on my palace roof, that one.
Yeah.
The key question of that story that we brought out was, how does the inner masculine fully come into power? And the answer through the symbol of, tailoring and making clothes, embodiment, the answer was through embodiment. And then I think it was in last week's Nettles and Roses story.
Yeah.
The same question was put to the feminine, which is, how does the inner feminine fully come into power? And the answer from Nettles and Roses was grief, going into grief through singing your song of grief. And so the next question that begs is, well, okay, I mean, in the Nettles and Roses story, we had the water in the well, touch to the baby, touch to the eyes. And we know because it was a well and it was water from the Frog King, right? This is a symbol of grief, symbol of going down, symbol of healing. But there weren't a lot of, like, we didn't go into the well, right? We didn't go into the well to see what happens down there. We kind of touched the cocoon symbolically, and the cocoon transformed us. But we didn't dive into like what is actually happening in that cauldron of the cocoon. And so the next question then is, what does grief itself actually look like? And my feeling of this story is that this story gives a bit of a zoom in into the specific mechanics and nature of grief. Right? And this is the secret key to healing that we talk about in the sort of headline of this session. It is grief at this high abstract kind of intellectual level, but then we dive into, what is the nature of this grief? And we've said a couple of times that the key to the whole thing is grief. The key to healing is grief, specifically not depression, but grief. They are two completely different things, and fully surrendering into grief. Here you can almost say that the princesses who refuse the sort of ugly, kind of unkempt, never washed soldier, go into depression, whereas the soldier goes into grief. Now, there's a lot of themes here. We could do a whole weekend retreat just on this topic, which reminds me, if people are interested in doing some kind of Zoom retreat, send us an email, let me know. It's something we've been thinking about, mainly because I think we're going a little stir crazy. Someone posted a photo on Facebook from the retreat we did in Napa Valley now 2 years ago. Like yesterday was like the 2-year anniversary of that Napa retreat, and someone posted, and I was just like, oh my gosh, it's been it's been way too long. So I think everyone should have our email, or just post something in the comments, and let us know if you'd be interested in doing some kind of like more intensive weekend retreat on Zoom, obviously social distanced. So for me, when I enter into the story, where the story starts, right, is where we are at a point of failure, right, where the soldier has been through 3 wars, has seen a lot of action, and he's got nothing in return for it, not even an addled egg. An addled egg, the egg is a symbol of rebirth, new beginnings, and an addled egg is like a rotten, sort of, messed up, not fruiting egg. And he doesn't even get that. He doesn't even get that. He doesn't even get a new beginning. He's at the end of it. It's almost this feeling of, we've done all this, we've lived all this life, and it's all for nothing, right? It's all for nothing. And right at that point of hitting a dead end, depression, I've done all this stuff, I fought 3 wars, I've got no loot, I've got no medals, I don't even have an addled egg. And you're right at the dead end. And it is right at that point that the devil, which is also a part of you. So those of you who have not been following these Life Sacred Space sessions, or are not familiar with our work, the way we read dreams, the way we read these fairy tales, is that every major actor in the dream is a symbol of a different part of your own inner self. Right, so the princesses are you, the devil is you, the czar is you, the soldier is definitely you, the gold is another part of you, the lake, etc., etc. So right at this point, there is this part of you, this devil part of you, who comes up and makes you an offer. Now, this devil comes from the underground, from the chthonic realm. Actually, in this case, not even from the underground kind of fire and brimstone realm, but from underneath the lake. And underground is where all the healing happens, right? Healing happens underground. Healing doesn't happen in the spiritual realm, right, of ideas and abstract concepts. Healing happens in the ground, in the soul, not in the spirit, in the body. Underground is where seeds go down to germinate. All wheat, all corn comes from underground. And also gold, gems, precious stones are all formed in the heated furnace of the underground. And gold, of course, is a symbol of insight, right? That comes from these chthonic underground processes. So then, just as it is true in the physical natural world, where seeds go underground to germinate and transform, and ores and earth go underground to form into gold and precious stones, so it is true within us as humans as well. There may be interesting intellectual answers up above in the world of spirit and ideas, but the actual healing, where the rubber meets the road, is only down below. So it reminds me of this quote that I was reminded of this week from Nietzsche, where in one of his works, his more poetic works, he describes coming to the point where you see your life mountain before you, and the highest heights you have to scale as the next step of your life, like the ultimate sort of masterpiece is before you. And right at that point, the only way for you to go forward is to not go up, but to go down. Right? And it's more of a prophetic work, but he sort of developed these ideas later as well. But the idea here, echoed in a lot of, echoed in this tale, but echoed in a lot of different areas, is when you are searching to go for your highest high, not for money or prestige, but in the sort of depths of the actual bliss of your life, the meaning and purpose of your life, your highest peak, your biggest mountain before you, the way to proceed is to go down into healing, into grief, into all these different things. So right at this point where he hits the dead end, the chthonic part of him, the devil, right, which has been demonized, but devil, comes from the Sanskrit word deva, right, which means it's the same root that leads to the word devil, but it's also the same root deva that leads to the word divine. And so it's not necessarily bad. It's just been sort of demonized by sort of, the Abrahamic sort of prism and lens. But that's not how it was before that. And so the deal that's struck with the devil is not to give me a pound of flesh and not to promise me your firstborn child or any of those things. The deal that is struck is that you do not wash. Mm-hmm. What does it mean to not wash in these archetypal mythopoetic realms? To not wash is a metaphor / archetype of grief, where the idea is that you do not edit or censor or suppress or constrain what naturally comes up out of you, what naturally comes up out of your body. The whole point of washing is to make yourself not smell like your body, right? Body odor is disgusting, so we put creams and deodorants and soaps on ourselves in order to not smell like, the bodies that we are. Cutting our hair, cropping things back, trimming our nails so we don't have, sort of claws. For men in particular, right, in our modern society, we wear a collar, we wear cuffs, right, and we wear a tie, which is basically a form of a leash, to show that we are civilized, Yeah. And so the idea when you go into grief is that all of that goes out the window. You do not edit or censor or suppress or constrain what naturally comes up out of you. You are fully embodied, right? And it feels a lot like COVID, right? Where we're not, people are not wearing makeup. They're not getting mani-pedis. I have friends who talk about, it's like, I don't know when the last time I put a bra on was. We're definitely not getting dressed for work. Everyone's going to Zoom in their pajamas or whatnot, right? And so in this metaphor, you do not cut your hair. You do not wipe your tears. When you cry, you do not suppress the crying by wiping your tears away and having other people go, shh, 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 shh. There now, that's enough, that's enough. You don't do that. Yeah. The tears come when they come, as they come, and you do not interfere with that. It is a form of sacred space. You do not interfere with that. You do not suppress it. Right? You hold space for whatever comes, and you don't blow your nose. You don't clear the bodily channel for spirit, breath to go through. If it's blocked, it's blocked. If not, breath comes out, spirit, but snot comes out, you let it alone. Right? You willingly hold space for whatever comes out of you. That is the deal. That is the deal with the chthonic, with the devil. Right? What is the deal with the higher? What's that?
And for 15 years, it's not just 1 or 2 days.
And for 15 years. And the symbol of that is for as long as it takes. Yeah. As long as it takes. Right? 15 years is not 15 years in real time. It's mythopoetic time. So it could mean, your whole lifetime. It could mean 15 days or 15 minutes. It could mean 15 decades, right? Yeah. Crossing into the next generation or in generation after that, in terms of intergeneral wounding and all of that. Mm-hmm. So you willingly, not kicking and screaming, right? You willingly hold space for whatever comes out of you. And that is the nut of the difference between depression and grief. Grief, you go down willingly. Faced with your highest mountain, you go down willingly in search of the gold. right? And you don't wash, you don't blow your nose, you don't cut your hair. With depression, you run away, you hit it, you numb it, you shield it, and eventually a hand comes up, grabs you, and drags you down anyway. You kind of end up in the same place, but there's a stylistic difference, right? And there's a question of lucidity, right? Are you aware of what's happening to you? Which makes a lot of the difference as to whether you're going to be able to suck the insight, the juice out of these dues that you're paying either way, right? And what you get in return for all this, never washing, is you get gold. You get gold. Now, in the mythopoetic realm, gold typically symbolizes insight. It's the gold of insight. And this is also the gold of the Frog King, right? When we talk about the Princess and the Frog story, the frog goes down and retrieves the golden ball, right? And this is the exact same gold. Typically in these stories, when you see gold, it's a symbol of insight. And when you see currency, like money, paper money, it's a symbol of ego power, right? It's with money that I can have my kitchen painted by going online, swiping my credit card, et cetera, et cetera. But gold is typically not seen as ego power. It's more seen as insight from the deep underground kind of chthonic processes. Here, the interesting thing is the devil gives him gold, insight, which is also usable as money.
Yeah.
Right? So it's insight that is immediately transmutable into ego power, which is extraordinary. Gold and insight that you get that you can actually spend and use. And it's a hint of the power of the formula being given in the story. Because typically in these stories, you either get gold or you get currency. And typically when you get currency, you're like, it's not the right deal to be taken. But here you get both, which is extraordinary. And that's kind of a hint as to the vast power of this process of going down willingly into grief. And so what happens when you do this is you get tremendous ego power, but you also turn into a frog. After 14 years, this guy has turned into a frog. He's disgusting. Just think about yourself if you don't wash for a month, right? Yeah. I mean, you can't even be in a room with yourself. You smell disgusting. You look disgusting. You can't even look at a mirror. And this guy, as we fast forward, is 14 years unwashed, right? There's probably bugs living in his hair, not cutting his hair, not trimming his nails, not wiping the tears from his face. So he has become symbolically a frog, but also he is richer than the Tsar himself, just like in the Frog King. In the Frog King, the frog is the only one who can go down into the well to retrieve the princess's golden ball, which is the key to everything. Which implies that he's actually even more powerful than the king. Because if the king could have gone down, princess would have just gone to daddy and say, just get my ball back. But she doesn't. She goes to the frog because she knows, everyone knows, it's an open secret, that even the king can't go down into the realm of the chthonic. Only the frog can go down into the realm of the chthonic. And the frog king turns out to be the prince of the next generation, the next kingdom, right? The butterfly, the post-transformation kingdom. So the Tsar then here asks him for the gold. And the soldier goes into the lake, which is basically a big well, sends his devil down and brings back 12 cartloads full of gold. It's the exact same pattern as in the Frog King. Now, in this case, unlike the Frog King, what's very interesting is that the princess in the Princess and the Frog situation reneges on her deal. Right? She says, yes, 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 you can eat at my dinner table, you can sleep next to me in my bed, and then she runs off once he brings the gold back. Here, what's really fascinating about this Russian version of the story is that as everything plays out, one of the things you notice is that everyone in the story acts in good faith, which is extraordinary. This is almost a diorama of how grief goes through without a hitch. Nobody cheats. Everyone acts in good faith. Even the princesses, when they say, I don't want to marry this frog, they act in good faith. You asked me, I'm not lying. I'm saying I don't want it. And, you know, we say such and such with our deal. We shake hands, and that's it. So in the story, you have this princess and the frog situation where the Tsar wants the gold, the ego power. And the frog/soldier is the key to the gold. And they make a bargain. And even in making this bargain, the frog/soldier doesn't cheat. When he paints a portrait of himself to be presented to the princesses, he doesn't cheat. He paints an accurate portrait of himself, snot, long hair, you know, unwashed self, and all. He doesn't lie and show himself to be handsome. And that is, I mean, just like this is a theme is almost not even worth sort of spending time sort of touching on here, except for the fact that it's so powerful with regard to our regular profane lives, is that once you've been in grief for 14, not the full 15, but for 14 years, what is this guy like at this point? One of the things is he hasn't cheated the devil. He's been faithful. Right. The second is when he goes to the Tsar, he doesn't clean up. He stays as he is. So the Tsar is like this King Arthur kind of symbol of the realm of money, prestige, career track. And this part of you that has gone through grief, even when regarding the prestige part of your own self, your own inner Tsar, presents himself as is. Right? Which is this like fifth chakra kind of level of development where you are voicing the fifth chakra, Vishuddha voice from the 7 chakras talk we did a few months ago. You are voicing truthfully, even to your own self. Right? It's not that profane echo of the 3rd chakra, Manipura, where you're going to do whatever you need, look good, dress for success, fake it till you make it, in order to exert your will to power on the world and win and get ahead. At Vishuddha, your voice comes through truly, and you don't lie to the world around you. You appear as you are, and you also do not lie to your own inner self. So when the Tsar wants money to like continue his reign of ego power in the outer world, the frog shows up as he is. And when he says, all right, well, I don't know, you need to talk to the inner feminine, the daughters, the next emerging level of the inner feminine. And we're going to paint a portrait. You're going to make your case and sort of present yourself. He says, all right, and the portrait he paints is absolutely accurate. He does not lie anymore. He does not need to lie. After you've been in grief for that period of time, all the facade falls away. Right? All the facade falls away. You know, a shower, a shave, and a haircut would do just fine. It would take him half a day to get cleaned up again, and yet he does not do that. So there are 3 sisters then. The first 2 sisters are always the first, whenever there's 3 siblings, right, in these fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales, the first 2 always represent the bully voices within us, the inner critic. Well, what are the neighbors going to think? Who's going to marry you? Who's going to love you if you do that? How are you going to make money doing that? And they are the siblings of basically prestige / power status and wealth, ego power, right? So the first 2 sisters care for money and prestige. For those of you who have done healing, soothing and shielding. Soothing and shielding. Because one of the other things you don't do when you never wash is if you have a wound, you let it be. Right? You don't wash yourself. You risk infection. That's fine. Whatever comes, even the bacteria that infect me, are mythopoetically a part of me. I do not suppress anything that comes up. The first 2, money and prestige, soothing and shielding, they say no to the frog. And they swear profanity in the name of the devil, and they get sent down into, doesn't feel like grief, it feels like depression. So their souls get sent down to the chthonic for pressure and containment and for transformation. That's what the chthonic wants. That's what the grandfather devil wants. When he says, you know, you haven't sent any souls down here for processing. Right? And how does the kingdom work when there are no souls in the underworld? Right? The underworld going down into the, I mean, without the cocoon, there would be no butterflies. And without butterflies, there would be no more caterpillars.
You know, the cooking fire underground makes so much more sense now that you say that.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So the cauldron and the fire and the cooking and everything is just the same
that
thing.
makes diamonds. It's the heat that creates gold. It's the heat that germinates seeds for all of the fruiting abundance that we have in the upper world.
Yeah.
So without that, there's nothing. Another way of thinking about that is that there is always then a part of you that is down in grief.
Mm-hmm.
There is always a part of you that is down in grief. Just like there's always, you know, the cycle of food where it like grows out of the ground, you eat it, it goes through you, through your upper digestive tract, through your lower digestive tract, and then out the other end of you, back into the ground, and then back up as wheat, into bread, and into your system again. Right? It is a cycle, and there is always food, alimentary sort of stuff in the form of bread or poop, right? They are always present in the system. I mean, because it's a beautiful, ideally balanced system. And so this idea that there is always something underground within you in grief and cooking, and according to this pattern, this archetype, that's okay, that's expected. Yeah. Right? It's when you think or presume I'm done with grief, there's no part of me that's grieving, that like, you know, we run into trouble. Like we need to sort of force turn the wheel a little bit. And, you know, things like pandemics start to like flare up. Anyway, so the third daughter accepts. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the frog/soldier turns into Prince Charming. Mm-hmm. Right, at the 15th year, he says, all right, well, I've got to get married now, so turn me into a youth. And the devil says, yeah, no problem. He sticks him literally into the cauldron, into the cocoon. Yeah. Right, disassembles him down to the bones, joint by joint, and then reassembles him into this beautiful, handsome youth, this Prince Charming. The frog goes into the cocoon, comes out as the butterfly Prince Charming. He marries the third daughter, and they live happily ever after. And then even the young devil is rewarded for doing right. That's not how the grandfather would have done it, but this young devil. So when you see children and babies in dreams, they are a symbol of the next emerging form of this part of you. Right, so the version 2.0, 3.0 of this part of you. And a fascinating, very poignant thing here is that even the devil within you has transformation and reemergence. So we have this young devil, which is this next version, which is not fire and brimstone of the grandfather, but is, I mean, the relationship between the soldier and the devil is very intimate. Right? And it's very much in good faith. They're like talking, they're like passing the ball back and forth. You know, the devil is not threatening the soldier with fire and brimstone, and the soldier is not ordering the devil around like a slave. It's a very brotherly, collegial kind of thing. And in return for that, the young devil doesn't get one soul, he gets two souls in return. Right? And those princesses that are now bound to the devil are going down into depression, into the world of the chthonic, like Persephone and Hades and Demeter, right? To basically continue this cycle of life. So bringing these two inner feminines down is an initiation into healing. We have to bring these down. This is how we heal the kingdom. Yeah. I guess one other thing I had in my notes here is to sort of zoom in a little bit into this relationship with the devil. Because here, the devil comes up and makes an offer. And the soldier, because he's at the end of his rope, right at the beginning when he was just signing up for his first war, he would have been like, I don't even want to talk to you. I'm in the middle of going after glory, right? He's in the heroic phase of his life cycle, where he's all about the solar and the sun and the glory and the shining of accomplishment. And it is this story, in this part of the story, he is going down out of the solar into the chthonic. Right? So heroic and chthonic are kind of contrasts. And often for many people, the heroic is in the first kind of, youthful phase of life, and the chthonic is like in the more sort of grieving, crone, wise person phase of life, right? Where you have actually gone into grief. So this rendering of the devil relationship is really loving and tender here, where the soldier and the devil have a very close relationship. He asks for the gold, the devil runs off to get the gold. When he asks to be turned into the youth, the devil does it. Now, it's not painless. He gets taken apart, chopped into pieces. The soldier is regestated from the cauldron, the belly of the beast, the cocoon. And so the soldier acts in good faith, but the devil acts in good faith as well. Right? The devil has taken him apart. He's just this stew in the cocoon. I mean, the caterpillar butterfly is the most vulnerable when they're in the cocoon. If you slice the cocoon open and all this goo spills out, it doesn't even know because it wasn't even conscious anymore. Right? But the soldier trusts the devil, and the devil grants him his wish. The devil could have just eaten the stew or fed it to the other devils. Right? And instead, he protects the cauldron until the transformation is complete. And there's this trusting relationship between the two, which is just so lovely and extraordinary. And this then also brings in clarity for the soldier, clarity of vision. What I mean by this is the soldier has had 3 wars. The soldier has now gone down into grief. 14 years, he's come out a frog. And the first thing that the Tsar offers in return for gold, just like the princess in The Princess and the Frog, is the frog says, I can get your golden ball for you, but what will you give me in return? And first touch on the ball. This is always the first offer, right, of the prestige side, is I offer you money and prestige. And when you are the frog, you say, I don't want your golden crown. I don't want your jewels. I don't want the titles that daddy can bestow on me. And he's like, well, what do you want, right? And when he answers, that's another story. So in exactly the same way, the first thing that the Tsar offers is to make him a general, to give him status, prestige, ego power. And the soldier does not accept this deal, just like the frog, because he has gone into grief about the 3 wars he's already been in. Because he's had this life experience of the 3 wars, right? He knows what it's like to be a soldier. He also knows what it's like to be a corporal, a lieutenant, sergeant, and a general. And he's like, thanks, but no thanks. Right? Not for me. What the soldier wants is integration. He wants to marry one of the princesses. And all of this comes from talking to the devil. Right? The devil is advising him all the way. And it's just very tender because it's obvious. This came up in our brainstorm. It's obvious that the soldier and the devil talk a lot. Right? They're very, very close. And obviously, like when you don't wash for 15 years, right, you lose all your friends. Who else are you going to talk to? The Tsar only comes to you because he needs money. He needs a loan, right? Nobody talks to you like willingly. Only the devil, who brought you into grief, who is your companion through grief, is the one you talk to, get advice from, get more gold from in this form of insight. This is a very intimate friendship. And there's just something about modern religions, right? Abrahamic systems, where we take everything of the darkness, everything of the chthonic, everything of the devil, the deva, the divine, on the soul body level. And by the way, while we're at it, everything about the body, sex is bad, gluttony is bad, all physical pleasures are bad. And we banish them into the dark, which isn't necessarily bad. Dark isn't bad, right? All these things grow in the dark. But then we say all of the dark is bad. And we cut off from body, we cut off from the chthonic, we cut off from everything of that. And all we have are concepts, intellect, abstraction, which is wonderfully powerful when it's concentrated, but it's only 1/2 of the sky or less. It's like empty. Right? It's absolutely empty. And so it's this kind of thing where, and there are hints of this everywhere once you have this lens, right? Once you have eyes to see, you see it everywhere, even in the game of chess. It's white versus black, right? Black is evil, black, is sort of, and white must win. It can't just be whatever. It's disaster when white loses, since white made the first move too. But the alternate reading here is that there's white and black. Black is minding its own business, right? And white is the one who draws first blood, right? White fires the first shot, right? Pawn to e4. And that's the secret sort of hidden archetype of chess, where it's like we vilify the dark, but white is the one who's doing the first vilifying. And that unbalances the whole thing. And, every chess game is a war, right? Yeah. So then when we then talk about the secret key to healing, what we're really talking about is grief and the close-in mechanics of grief. How does grief work? This is the secret key to healing. How does grief work? So then in looking at the archetype, looking at the story, what can we learn about grief with the help of this fairy tale never wash archetype? Well, a couple of things I come up with are, number one is grief is something you go into willingly. You willingly don't soothe. You willingly don't shield. You willingly don't drink. You don't numb. Not because drinking's bad and of the devil and morality. It's not about that. You willingly stop numbing in order to fully feel the pain. And you sit with the pain and you do not fear it. That's grief. When you sit with the loss and the pain of the loss and you do not run away, you let that fire cook you. And that's the terror of the fire of grief, because it is a slow cooking flame. Right? If it was just one gunshot and I'm done, that wouldn't even be so bad. But grief is the fire that cooks you your whole life, right? Slowly. And the power of grief is when you go into that, knowing that's what will happen, and you go into it willingly for an indefinite period of time. Am I still grieving the wounds of my childhood? Yes, absolutely. Right, and that is the way it is, and I welcome that. And that devil of my childhood wounds is still sitting next to me. And we, on a good day, we talk all the time. We talk all the time. One of the key sort of signals that someone is running away from their grief, and I almost hesitate to say that because everyone does this. I do this. Okay, so just to disclaim it a little bit with that. Is to say, well, I've done all this therapy, I've done all the healing, I do yoga, meditation, I take my supplements every day. Obviously, I must be done with that, right? What more do you want? What the hell, right? When are we going to? Are we done yet? Can we get on with it? Can we get on with our regular lives? Says the Tsar, right? Yeah. And when someone says that, it's like methinks they doth protest too much. Right? If your grief is really over, then you go to the devil and you say, hey, I need a little more gold and turn me into a youth. It just happens. Right? You barely think the thought it happens. When you're like, well, what do you mean 15 years? Isn't 10 enough? Right? The moment you say something like that, it is just a signal marker of well, you're not done. Obviously, you're not cooked. Right? If you can still talk like that, you're not cooked. Why is the chicken still talking? It's not cooked, and the chicken's like, no, I'm done. It's like, okay, I don't even know what to say. Right? So when I advise people directly, obviously I never say that to their faces, because it's like you can't, you cannot. You're just like, well, okay, and you hold space for them and all the rest of it. But now I'm not advising anyone directly. I'll just give you the pattern. Right? I'll just give you the pattern.
I remember asking this question. I think this was about 5 or 6 years ago, I think. Yeah, I did. I was like, and I remember the kind of pain that came, that gave rise to the question as well. And my question was, Artie, will will I ever be done with healing? And what does it look like after I'm done? You know, and I know how much pain to kind of say that. And my hope was you would say, oh, you know, it's just a matter of a few months and you'll be all right. And then I also knew that's not the answer. So I was, but yeah, I mean, you didn't say anything, but then you didn't also say, oh, this is never going to end. Forget it.
It's like, I don't know. Look, squirrel. Oh, is that your mom behind you? You need to like get the phone.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, it tells you something of, you know, your caliber and character when you're like, I thought you would say it would only be a few months. Most people would be like, a few months? I thought this was a weekend retreat. I want my money back.
Yeah.
So yeah. So number one, you go down into grief willingly. Willingly. Yeah. If you can. Mm-hmm. If you can. And if you can't, that's okay. In sacred space, we hold space for each other and ourselves, however we are. If we're like, I'm not going, I can't go yet, you're grabbing onto the radiator, that's fine. That's fine. You are where you are. Right? And it's a cycle. Like you break through, you go down into grief willingly, it will happen again. This story is an archetype. It's not a newspaper report of something that happened, you know, hundreds of years ago and will never happen again. This is happening in us. This is like a diorama of the digestive tract, or the sort of glucose cycle, ATP cycle in our cells, mitochondria, right? It's happening all the time. And if you are aware of it, you can make sure it's unblocked and it's flowing freely. So number one, you go into grief willingly. Number two, going down into grief willingly is the only way to get the gold. Going down into grief willingly is the only way to get the gold. You see this in fairy tale, after myth, after archetype, after fairy tale. Only the frog, unwashed, can go down and access the gold. No one else. No one else. Number three, it's okay to bargain in good faith. It's okay to bargain in good faith. Oh, you know, you've been through 3 wars, you're, you know, down and out. You know, I've got some work for you. How about this? And you're like, well, what do I get in return? It's like, well, it's 15 years and you never wash, and that'll be your service. Well, in return, I want all the gold I can use. And the devil says, you drive a hard bargain, but all right. If that's what it takes to get you to go down willingly, fine. But even with all this gold, you can never wash. Right? And I'll come back to that in a moment. So number three, it's okay to bargain in good faith. And then number four, fourth and finally, you can trust the chthonic elements within you. All right. The devil that comes up is a part of you. And we've been taught to vilify it and push it away. In this archetype, it's saying very plainly, this little devil who's working in your favor and not cheating you, right, is on your side. You can trust it. Yeah. You make a deal with it, you act in good faith, and the devil will also act in good faith. Nobody in the story cheats anybody else. It's extraordinary. The czar doesn't cheat. The princesses don't cheat. They just openly, you know, they're given the choice and they decline. That's fine. That's fine. Nobody cheats. And so I'll go through those 4 really quickly again. You go down into grief willingly. Going down into grief is the only way to the gold, the insight, the healing. It is okay to bargain in good faith. And 4, you can trust the chthonic elements within you. These 4 together are the secret to grief, and grief is the secret key to healing. Yeah. Grief is the fire that cooks the transformation. When you finally wash before the 14 years are up, if you do that, you put out the fire. Yeah. right? If you say, I'm sitting with my pain and the pain is too much, and you start drinking again, I mean, forget about the health issues, the societal issues, losing your job issues, endangering others issues of alcoholism. I mean, that's all valid. But the almost in this archetype, the most critical damage that does is you put out the fire of your Instant Pot pressure cooker because you've numbed the pain. Right now, it's like, well, that's just, I mean, and then all the heat goes out of the pressure cooker. And once that happens, you don't even know, like all the timing is off. Like usually it's like a 6-hour braise for this cut of like, lamb shank or whatever, right? If you stop it 2 hours in and let it sit for a day or two, it's like you probably have to throw the whole thing out and start over again, right? The timing's completely off. And so when you do that, and look, you will do that. Right? You will do that. Everybody does that. But when you do that, the key is to know you're going to need to soothe and shield, to put out the fire for a little bit. Do it for a little bit and then jump back in. Right? Just give yourself a little bit of relief so that it's somewhat more tolerable. That's why I'm like, people who do healing with me, I'm like, you are going to soothe and shield. But let's just be smart about how we choose. It's like, let's not do the alcohol. If all soothing is the same, then do like a day of Netflix. Call and stick to work and do a day of Netflix if that's what it will take. Right? You turn the fire down enough for long enough to like catch up with yourself, and then you go back and hit it again. And all you're doing is sitting with the pain and not running away from it. Okay. It's like so grief is the critical fire that cooks the transformation. There is no transformation without grief with this fire. And look, it's like when you have something, this image came to me, something very upsetting that's happened to you, trauma, all of which is valid. And what I'm about to describe is absolutely valid. If you've done it, I've done it, and you go on a retreat, a wellness healing retreat. And sometimes people will have you do a ritual where you write something you want to let go of that doesn't serve you anymore. And you burn it in a bonfire, and it just goes up in smoke. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if that helps you in the moment. Okay. But the grief path of handling that same pain, right, or loss, is a different kind of path. It's a different kind of image and archetype. And you choose as sovereign from moment to moment. You're the sovereign of your life, what you need and how you're going to do it. So one is to say, I'm going to write this and burn it, let it go and release it, shoot it into the sun, and I can, hooray, move on with my life. That's fine. The alternative route where you say, I'm not climbing this mountain. To get around it, I'm going down underneath it, is to, metaphorically speaking, you would write the same thing on a piece of paper. And instead of burning it, you wear it around your neck. For everyone to see, and you sit with it, and you never wash. That is the alternative. Not literally necessarily. I mean, you could do that, right? But the point is, metaphorically, archetypally, you are not running away. You're not pushing away. You are embracing the thing you lost. You are embracing the loss of the thing you lost. And that grief then turns you into a frog. And we know that there's no gold without the frog, but that is not why you do it. You do it because the frog, so to me sometimes writing the thing and burning it is like in the Roses and Nettles story, the Rose Princess running off with the prince early in the story. And basically trying to burn off the other parts of her, the ugly princess, the evil stepmother, the evil sorceress. You could do that. We do that. I mean, in the Rose Princess, it's a part of the natural pattern. You will do that. I've done it. But it never actually works. The sorceress always comes back to make her just claim and to argue her just grievance. That you cannot leave us behind.
Yeah, someone who's actually done, that part of it. I've actually done the writing and burning thing, and in my experience, what it does is it gives amazing relief in that moment. You feel like, I feel so much lighter having done that.
Yeah.
But eventually it doesn't go away because it's within. It's not that which is written on paper. It's what is within us. So,
right. And
then it comes back again. And I find that the alternative, which is to just do the journaling and keep it, preserve it. And kind of go back and read it sometimes if you're brave enough to kind of go back. Even if you don't do that, but that preserving in the journal is so much more helpful in that way. That it stays, but you acknowledge that this is something to stay. I think that's what does it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is, there's a next level though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason we never even get to the next level is because in Western society, especially American society, we're taught to never go down. We're taught to fear the dark. We're taught that they're only winners and losers is a bad thing. You lose your worthiness for being loved if you're a loser, which is total bullshit, right? And so we have this fear of the chthonic, of the negative, of the painful. Yeah. And we're constantly running away.
Yeah.
Okay. When American men meet each other in a bar, right? What is the script? All of the men who are watching this can repeat this with me, chapter and verse, right? How's it going, Artie? It's great. How's it going with you? It's great. Right. And I could be like meeting with my brother-in-law talking about like this impending divorce or whatever, or, like he's planning to like hurt himself or whatever. I mean, we plan to like get together. And the first opening sort of ritualistic handshake we have is, how's it going? Everything's great. How's it hanging with you? It's hanging great. And then only after like the fifth or sixth beer do we finally break that down and start talking about the real thing we openly said we were going to get together and talk about. That's how hard it is to break into the chthonic in American society. It's like we agree, we handshake that we will never go down, and that is the key to, I mean, all of our troubles in a lot of ways. With women around here, around Stanford, around Silicon Valley, they meet up with each other, and there are different versions of this. But this was told to me by actually a female professor at Stanford when I was explaining all of this one day, and she was like, "Well, I'll tell you the women version of that." And I was like, "Tell me." And I took out my pen. I was ready to write it down. And she's like, "When we meet each other," and this is like the high-powered, high-tech Silicon Valley, Northern California, power mom, doing everything, volunteering, raising money, and like, winning the Nobel Prize for like whatever as a Stanford professor, right? This like insane level of like competence and perfectionism. They meet each other for coffee or tea, and they're talking about their divorces or whatever they're going through. But their first thing is not, how's it hanging? It's great. How's it hanging with you? The female high-powered version is, how are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. So busy with everything, this, how are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy too. And this busyness is a shield of perfectionism, where it's like, I can't take on anymore because I'm so busy. I won't say no, right? But I'm just putting up this shield of how busy I am, right? And then when I say I'm so busy, you say, oh, aren't you also doing this other thing? Oh yeah, that too. I didn't have time to like mention that. So you're polishing my shield. And then when you say you're so busy, I was like, aren't you? But how about this? And how about this other thing? He's like, oh yeah, and I'm polishing your shield. And then we're comfortable. We're not going to mess with each other. And we can sit down and actually talk about the disaster we got together to talk about. I mean, think about that situation. It would be like supremely bitchy of me for you as a fellow woman, right? For you to say, I say, how are you doing? And it's like, oh, I'm so busy. And I was like, Well, I mean, you can't be that busy. You have time to meet me for tea. Right? So don't say that, right? Don't say that. You don't even need to know. You know not to say that. But it's like, yeah, don't say that. So, so we always agree never to go down. And because of that, we are completely unfamiliar. I mean, the chthonic world, the underworld, is like a completely foreign country to us. Mm-hmm. When it is a part of our own inner selves. Yeah. These inner rich depths from which the wheat of abundance springs forth, from which gold, precious jewels spring forth from within us, is completely foreign to us because we're terrified of looking at it. Because in our, religious social systems, we're taught explicitly, don't go into the forest, stay in the village. Okay. But once you get familiar with that realm, you realize you can go unwillingly. It will hurt, right? But pain is not always equivalent to suffering. Yeah. Right? So it will hurt. It's okay. It's like when I get my flu shot, the needle hurts too, but I pay for it, right? I'm happy to get it, right? You can act in good faith with the actors you find there, with the parts of you find there, and stunningly, you can bargain. You can negotiate with the powers, the life forces that you find there, because they are your equals and they love you. Right? You're just trying to figure out the asset allocation, the resource allocation of your life, specifically in the Russian and Slavic tradition. When you go into the forest, you will often run into the devil, or you will run into the feminine version of the devil, which is the Baba Yaga. And the move here, like, so when you meet Baba Yaga, in most instances, she eats you, right? She consumes you. Yeah. And the move is, you can't just be the helpless innocent. Heavens me, I'm this helpless child. I have no idea how I got here. Instantly, you get eaten. And it's also not the other extreme, to be the fierce brute force warrior, like forcing your way through, holding her at sword point. Right? She waves her wand, turns you into a pig, and eats you as well, like Circe on her island. Yeah. Okay. And the move, obviously, also is not to run away, just like in the Frog King, because these forces are all inside you. So where are you going to run? Yeah. The only move here is not to be a helpless innocent, as most Americans are taught to be. Oh, like racism? I had no idea there was racism in my country. Right? Mm-hmm. So the helpless innocent, you get eaten. It's to be the fierce warrior, right? Mm-hmm. That's not the move either. Make America great again. We're just going to figure everything out at the point of a gun. You get eaten. Mm-hmm. And also, you can't run away, because where you're going to. This is all the outer world is a reflection of things going on within you. Mm-hmm. The only move here is to engage as an equal and to bargain, which is like an initiation from childhood into adulthood. Right? You don't expect things to be handed to you, like fed like a helpless infant. Mm-hmm. You don't expect the world to be your conquest, because you will eventually meet something you can't conquer. And you don't expect the world to be something you can run away from. You stand your ground and you bargain as equals. You say, I want all this. Right? And the frog says, what will you give me if I give it to you? And you say, well, what do you want? Right? Let's bargain. Let's bargain. What the soldier asks for at the beginning, he asks for service. He has no idea, no vision of how he could be useful. So that's what he asks of the devil. And the devil shows up and says, I'll give you service. Here's what you can do. And here's what you'll get in return. So it is this sovereign kind of archetype. When you want something, you look to the part of you that has it within you and say, let's make a deal. You don't cheat, and you follow through in good faith, and the other side will follow through in good faith as well. I mean, when we talk about manifestation, this is kind of what we're talking about as well. We basically say what we want at the highest level, not need, not want, but of desire. Yeah. And when all the forces within you are aligned, the thing tends to manifest pretty instantaneously. So the big problem with this kind of manifestation is not that there's a blockage of the mechanics of getting the thing. The big blockage typically, and I have this all the time, is that you don't actually know what you want at this higher level.
Ask, yeah.
Yeah, you don't know what to ask for. It's like all the things you're asking for are need and want. Prestige, money, shielding, all the things that put out the fire.
Yeah.
And it's like, but if you keep the fire on and you never wash and you become a frog, then you can have the gold of anything you want. What do you want? And you're like, I have no idea. Because we are, for whatever reason, in modern society, in profane modern society, we're taught not to ask that question of ourselves or of other people. We are taught not to go down. Yeah. We are taught to fear grief more than death itself. And so reading a story like this gives you an alternative path, an alternative vision, way of seeing things that you can, in sacred space, consider. And as the sovereign of your own life, decide for yourself how much of that you would like to incorporate or not. But this devil, this all-powerful devil, is within you. And it can be bargained with. And it will act in good faith if you act in good faith, mutually. Yeah. That's the bulk of the notes I had on that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so powerful in the sense that the story doesn't just say you've got to go into grief and you've got to completely immerse yourself, go down and spend 15 years. I mean, that's not just the one point of it, but when it gives you this solution which says, go into grief, but how you handle it and all the things that you need while you manage it and everything that, that helps you go through that, all the gold you need and all the help you need, everything is right there and it will work with you. And this is how you work with it. So I felt like it's just so helpful as well. So it's not just that one message that says, go into grief. And that's it. But it just says, okay, if you go into grief, there is help at hand and you do all of these things and you can ask for these things. So it's a wonderful map to have, especially if you're just going into grief for the first time, willingly and consciously, and you know what's coming. It's just so useful to know that this is the kind of guidebook that you have into the world of grief. Make use of this. Yeah. Because I think sometimes it was the reason we fear going into grief is because we don't know that there is this kind of help at hand. Like you said, we feel helpless. We feel like nothing's in our control, and we can't really, again, the profane thing of I can't control what happens to me. I can't control what happens to my life if I take this path. And then you feel that I don't know where I'm going if I can't control these things. And like you said, we've been told that only the world of brute forcing your way through success is a desirable world. And anything where you can't control, where you can't predict the outcome is not desirable, because that will always be disastrous. It will always be trouble. And you don't want that. Right. So the fear is that, if I go there, if I have no help, and if I can't control what happens, and if it's definitely going to be undesirable, then why am I even doing this? Right. So I felt like the story just gives this out so beautifully. It says, go down here, but then also it'll be fine. You will have help. You're not alone. So that itself was very very soothing about the story.
Mm. And it also is, to me, this kind of initiation in a lot of ways, where someone was asking, do you really even have a choice to go down into grief willingly? And the answer is yes, absolutely, you have a choice. I mean, there are countless examples of people who, are soothing with substances and alcohol and, sexing around and endless, one relationship after. I mean, you just choose your poison, right?
Yeah.
The modern sort of economic machine is in many ways nothing but like a grief avoidance machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's like Vegas. It's like flashing lights everywhere to get you to like take your mind off your troubles and forget all your cares and everything. And the thing is, like, so you do have a choice. You can run your whole life and then you die and your grief is like undigested. And it's a whole other question of what happens to that after you die. Does it get passed on somehow? But I think even intuitively, we all know it does get passed down because the grief you have, the trauma that you have came from somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And if I have grief that I've taken on and I'm healing, I'm digesting, then I'm not spraying it on the people around me, right? If I'm running, I'm spraying.
Yeah.
I'm leaving a whole wake of destruction as I pass in one way or another. And so I think the relevant thing here is that you do very much have a choice. Right. And the state of the world right now is that you're seeing entire societies make that choice en masse, knowingly or not, right, to avoid the grief of, societies and nations built on Holocaust and slave labor. And I mean, I was reading something by James Baldwin the other week where he said, the issue is not that America was built on the Holocaust of Native peoples and indigenous peoples or built on slave labor, right? This stuff has been happening since, Greek and Roman times, since, whatever. So since the dawn of human history, this kind of conquest and rape and pillage has been happening. It is part of the human experience. And this is James Baldwin. This is like a Black American sort of philosopher, writer. And he said, the problem is not that these things happen. The problem is that these things happened. And we don't admit that they happened. We don't teach that they happened. We say that, I think the phrase he always uses is, we have this myth that, America, the United States, was founded by people who came from Europe and wanted to be free, right? These sort of heroic, noble, and certainly innocent, right? Sort of childish, innocent, souls thirsting for freedom. And when you look at the actual history of the country, that was not true, right? And so the thing he always sort of touches the jugular of for me is this idea of, if you garble your past and you don't look at it, you don't know where you came from. You don't know where you are. You definitely don't know where you're going. That's how he would put it. And for me, the way I translate that is that, there is a grief associated with being the person on whom these atrocities were inflicted upon. And there's also a grief associated with being the person or the descendants of the people who inflicted the atrocities on the other person.
Yeah.
And undigested grief, unacknowledged grief, where you constantly are running away from the past and running into the future, both profane realms, as we've said in the past, and skipping over the sacred of the present, because you can't you can't imagine standing still for 1 second, because the past will catch up with you. This is where the fear of grief comes from, the fear of going down. the fear of not soothing and shielding. And it's how it just sort of barrels forward into time and future generations, right? Okay. What else? Do you have anything else?
No, I mean, I'm curious as to what exercise you would recommend.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about that. So what I thought, and I'd love you to add to this as I describe it, is the exercise for this week between now and the next session, I think would be to sit quietly when you have some time, sitting in the car after you've parked wherever you're going to go, sitting in your kitchen alone just for a few minutes with pen and paper. And then to ask yourself, not even so much what do you grieve, that is a question you can ask for sure. But more specifically, to step even further into the realm of the chthonic. Or let's presume we're okay with taking on some expenditure of grief. Okay, we're not really familiar with how we do transactions in this realm, but this Artie Gowrie thing has been convincing. We're like more open to this concept of grief and going down into the chthonic. Well, before you do that, you're ready to sort of pay out, right? Sort of get some chips into this casino. Before you even do that, let's say first, what is it that you even want? Right? I don't want you paying grief for free. Right? You do it to get something that you want. So before we even step into this marketplace bazaar, right? Let's try to get clear on what it is we actually want at the level of need, want, or desire. If you had this little devil before you that says, well, I can strike a bargain with you. What is it that you actually will to have out of this interaction and relationship with the devil within you? At the level of need, at the level of want, and at the level of desire. And what part of you can actually go out and get it for you? Right, I could do this stuff and make all this money. If only I had more ambition. If only I had more energy. If only if I weren't so addicted to XYZ. Then I could have this. And then the question is not to make a deal and go after it. I'm like, well, hang on, big fella, just a second. Right, this thing that you say you may want, are you sure you want it? Right? Because the presumption is once you make this deal, both counterparties will be acting in good faith. And to the extent that you already have stuff to grieve, let's get as clear as possible on what it is we want. Because that is the thing you will get at the end of this next phase. And, all things being equal, I'd prefer to not spend another 10 years ending up with getting something that you realize at the end you didn't actually want. So what is it that you actually, and the way around that, right, is to say not what I need, not what I want, but what I actually desire, which is the question of bliss, which is the question of love, not fear, the question of the sacred, right? And then just things we've been talking about since March. Yeah. And so the exercise is to ask yourself, what is it I actually will to desire? What is it I desire at the highest level? Out of love for no good reason, not out of fear. And then you identify the part of you that can get you what you want. By the time you utter that desire to yourself, you voice to yourself truthfully, the appropriate devil will be right at your side. They've been waiting for this moment for a long time, I guarantee you. Yeah. And there he or she will be. And you can have a conversation and you can start to bargain with it and make a deal. Now, as an exercise for just this 1 week, I would just try it as an exercise. I would not make any promises. I would not seal any deals. Don't sign anything, for crying out loud. Just gather information, figure out what the landscape looks like, figure out what it is you actually want, Maybe, I don't know, we'll see after a week if it's still the same. Some people, every week they want something different. And it's like, you just have to wait for that to settle down before you can even move forward, really.
Yeah.
And then get the larger perspective and then figure out what it is actually that you would like to wish for, because you will get it. That's not the question. The question is, are you sure that's what you want? Put another way, careful what you wish for. Okay. So anyway, that's just the thought experiment I came up with to see what comes up. Only if you want. No pressure. No pressure.
I'm reminded of one of these, the Facebook videos or something like that I've watched, where this kid's doing his homework, and he has Alexa next to him, and he goes, "Alexa, what's 2 + 3?" And Alexa tells him it's 5, and he writes down 5 in his notebook. And he's basically just, asking Alexa for all the answers, and then gets everything done. And I'm thinking, I feel like that kid where if I have to figure out what I want, and there's this very handy devil right there, I'm just going to ask the devil, which is what I did. I'm like, can you help me find out what I want? Because that's the task I want you to do.
You can ask that too. You can ask that too.
So, yeah, it's just the easy thing. If you have an assistant helping you, might as well find that out.
See, this is why you need Gowrie here, to give you all the pro advanced tips. Gowrie has all the pro tips.
All the lazy steps.
All the lazy tips. Well, those are the pro tips. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
But it's funny because that is the question of manifestation too, right? Yeah. What do you actually desire?
Yeah.
And it's often, funnily enough, only after a period of grieving that you can even see clearly what it is you want.
Yeah.
It's almost like you don't know what you want until you're in your frog state.
Yeah, but everything's foggy. Everything's just so confusing, because how do you know what is in the realm of the profaneness, and what is it that is motivated by your desire for money and prestige, like you say, need and wants? What is actually motivated by your deepest desire? It's so hard to differentiate the two things. So it's just really difficult when you're so busy in the profane to figure out what you want. But down in the underground, you already don't care about the need and want. You don't really think much. I mean, you don't have the mind space to think about prestige and what will people say and all of those
things.
Yeah.
And you definitely don't want to be a general anymore.
Yeah, you don't want that. That was amazing about the story, where he just says no. And it's amazing how the king offers that as the first thing. He says, "Okay, I'll make you a general," because that's what everyone wants, right? I mean, how can you say no to that?
That's the easiest thing to offer.
Yeah, and it's funny because he's in this situation having to beg for money precisely because he's been waging too many wars.
Right.
And yet that's the only thing that comes to his mind. I'm going to make you a general and we'll go have more wars. Right?
Yeah. The one who's already bereft of insight, gold, and ego power. All he can offer is, another sort of wild adventure into seeking money and prestige.
Yeah.
And war, I mean, just creating more things to grieve, really. Okay. All right, good.
For the exercise, Artie, that's quite a lot to think over for the people.
Well, now with your pro tip, you made it a lot easier. So thanks for nothing.
The exercise, but I have to warn. I mean, having given that thing away, because this happened to me, and I did ask for this, and I said, "Help me find my deepest desire." Right, and this happened quite a few years ago, And I started talking to this part of me that was willingly engaging with me and then offering me all these things and saying, okay, let's do this and I'll help you out with that. And I asked this question, and I can look back now and say how this happened is that it actually directly led me underground. When I asked, can you help me find my deepest desire? It said, oh, okay, yeah, that should be easy. And straight off went into the underground. So it's not as easy as it sounds. And it's certainly not a very short-term thing. It doesn't last just a weekend.
Well, I mean, the question you asked was the advanced question, which is kind of trusting that devil within you could do anything. And you basically said, turn me into a beautiful youth. And it said, oh, okay, great. And you got chopped up. Thrown into the cauldron.
Yeah, so that's basically how it was. So it took a long time for the thing, but that's another aspect of it that I was going to say, how well the story tells, like you said, this beautiful trust between the soldier and the devil. And it takes a while. I mean, it's not something that comes so easily, at least for me, in the sense that initially talking to this devil of mine was more of an exercise to kind of try it and see, if I ask for this, let's see how this is going to work out. I mean, I know that the devil will work it out for me, but I want to see it manifested in the world, to see how that works. Because I know it's not going to look like a magic trick, right? It's not going to just manifest out of thin air. So how is the physics going to be? How is it going to work out? And trying that again and again and again and seeing that, yeah, this actually works. This is not a coincidence, not something that just happened and I'm going to dismiss it. I know this happened because I asked for it. But also it happened in a way where it just felt so organic, not a magic trick, not a gimmick, right? It really just worked and came out in the most organic way possible. And yet incredible, because if I hadn't asked for it, I'm sure it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
So just figuring that out and coming to see how this works every single time and building that level of trust was a whole thing in itself. So I think there's a whole lot of curious observation to make about that.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. I mean, it just makes me think of my own path where, I've had that same thing happen, right? Where I'm like, okay, I surrender, just do what you want, like put me on the path. And like all this stuff would explode and happen. And it's not so much like trusting that it will happen, but it's like knowing so well that it will happen. You're like, when it comes up and say, do you have any requests? I'm like, nope, I'm good. I'm good. Nothing to see here. I'm happy as I am. Don't you have any desires? Would you like this? No, I'm good. I'm fine. Just we'll call you. Don't call us. We'll call you. Everything's fine. Almost like trying to buy yourself time before the next like huge shifting of the tectonic plates. But there is this feeling of acceleration. Once a couple of plates start moving, you're like, oh, why is this thing working? Like, why? And you start banging on it. And then when it finally starts moving, it's like, it's not just the 2 plates you were thinking about. It was like the 16 other plates, tectonic plates that are attached to these 2. Everything starts to rumble and the earth starts to shake. When you start following, you go into grief and you start following this path of this path of bliss. So I love the way you characterize it, because I think people could be forgiven. I could be forgiven for thinking, you're like, oh, so the easy way is just to, ask the devil, like, help me figure out what I want. Or, you walk into a high-end sushi restaurant and it's like, I don't order. It's like omakase, let the chef decide, right?
Yeah.
And that is the quicker path, but it's not easier. If anything, it's harder.
Yeah.
if anything, it's harder and more terrifying to make that level of surrender. Yeah.
Yeah, because, you know, what if I tell the devil, find out what I should be asking and tell me, and then suddenly turns around and says, everything you've been doing for the last 35 years is all wrong. So we're going to take a whole new path now. I mean, that is absolutely terrifying, but it's possible that that can happen. Right?
Well, I don't like that answer. I want a second opinion. Well,
Yeah.
you're stubborn too.
And then you know that you can't at that moment go and say, yeah, no, I'm sorry, but I didn't ask that question, so just forget it. You know, we're not going. You've already heard it.
Yeah, you can't unsee it. Once you see your bliss path, you cannot unsee it.
Yeah. So that's
all right.
Right. Thank you, Artie.
Thank
get
you.
in the background. You would want to close the session now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You.
All right. Thank you so much, Gary. That was amazing as usual. And I hope you all found that to be interesting. And the exercise, again, is only if you want. No fear, threat, or control, no pressure, no expectation of participation. Okay. So with that, we're coming to the close of our time period. And now I'll go ahead and close the session. Our next session is, again, next Sunday, same time. It's free, open to the public. Please feel free to invite others if you feel like it. And there's a green call to action link in Crowdcast that you can hit to sign up for the next session right now. And in Facebook, in the text of the post for this live, you'll find a link where you can sign up for the next session for next Sunday as well. So with that, I will hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for holding this space with me and us, and thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment of this shared sacred space with me and with us. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great day, have a great week, and I will see you all in the next session. Thank you.